Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gary, your host. This is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk about the characters and creators, and then examine the stories and the art. And what I want to talk about this time is this book right here. This is GI Combat number 177 from 1975, featuring The Haunted Tank, written by Bob Haney and drawn by Sam Glansman. We've talked about both of those creators before. See, if I remember correctly, I think I talked about Bob Haney with the Dial H for Hero, and his name has come up a few other times as well. I just can't remember right off the top of my head. But Sam Glansman, he's best known for his years throughout his career, primarily doing war comics for DC and Charlton. And he did The Haunted Tank for several years. After Russ Heath had previously worked on it, and other creators. And but Sam Glansman is best known for his semi-autobiographical stories in DC Comics and also from other publishers of the USS Stevens, right? About his experiences on the ship, the USS Stevens, during World War II. Yeah, so he knew of what he spoke. And this issue has this great Joe Kubert action cover, as he did most of the covers of the war comics during this time period. And some of them great. One of my favorites is a Haunted Tank cover that he did, which from a book that I covered here before, and I just wish that the story had done the cover justice. I mean, it was a great cover. It's when you had that robotic Nazi just grabbing and ripping tearing the Haunted Tank apart, and the story, while a good story, just could not compare to that cover. And here, this is a good cover. It's very descriptive of what goes on in this story, although a bit more dramatically, because some of it is not as it is depicted here. Okay, and the Haunted Tank, which was featured in GI Combat, that series ran in GI Combat from 1961 to 1987, created by Robert Kanigher and Russ Heath. And the Haunted Tank is the second longest running war series at DC Comics, right behind Sergeant Rock. And in the story, the main character is the tank commander, Jeb Stuart, who is a descendant of, or should say probably distant relative, of the Confederate General Jeb Stuart. And the Haunted Tank started out being an M3 Stuart tank, and got the name Haunted Tank because the spirit of General Jeb Stuart uh, was helping guide the and protecting the tank and crew, and would occasionally talk to his namesake, but no one else could see or hear him. So Jeb would be standing there, and the crew would make jokes about it. Well, Jeb's talking to the ghost again. Ain't nobody there. Stuff like that. And eventually, that original M3 gets smashed up. They cobble, as in this story, it's called a patchwork tank. They cobble together pieces of other tanks to build one working tank, using various kinds of tanks. So it's basically a one of a kind. Now, after the end of this run, the Honda tank does make a few other appearances and some one shots and some like Secret Origins and the like. But Jeb Stuart eventually becomes a general himself, and he makes later appearances and is instrumental in forming the modern day Suicide Squad. So, let us take a little look inside the pages with the haunted tank. Okay, let's try this again. Here we go. Into the pages, the haunted tank. Okay, here we start off with the tank. Let's describe it as the patchwork tank, and General Stuart giving them some enigmatic advice to Jeb, and while Jeb is pondering that which he doesn't understand, the tank, the ghost of Jeb Stuart, pulls some shenanigans, changing the signposts, because this is June 5th, 1944, and they've just come from North Africa to England, and they're hustling to get to the port so that they can participate in the D-Day invasion of Normandy. Well, because of Jeb's shenanigans, they miss movement. They get there, and this MP, he places them all under arrest, and he's calling them cowards and crap, which really pisses off Jeb Stuart. So you're under arrest. Sit tight. Stay here. I gotta go get some more MPs. Yeah, like that's gonna happen. Jeb talks to the local fishermen and says, "What about that big old barge over there?" He said, "We've got to get into the fight." And that belongs to the Mad Dutchman, and the captain is this Dutchman, who happened to be in England when the Nazis overran Holland, and he's been stuck here, but he's been wanting to get into the fight and give the Nazis what for. So he says, "I'm game." They get the tank on the barge. Must be a pretty sturdy boat. Got that tank on there, and they start heading across the channel. Just as the MPs arrive, and they're not happy. They left a note here, says, "Gone to France. Court-martial us later." And they're puttering across there. And then the weather report was for clear weather, but there's this sudden squall. Well, that's not right. But Jeb, who's the only one who can see him, the ghost, is stirring up the squall. And think, what is the general doing? And then they see torpedo. The first torpedo just misses him, but the second one's going to be right on, dead on. But the waves lift the boat up just enough for the torpedo to clear their keel. And then they kill the U-boat with a shot from the tank. I'm surprised that the U-boat would have been on the surface during the squall. Unless it's very shallow. Because on a submarine, it's bad weather, you're better underwater. I know. And here they are approaching, but that squall took them off course. Oh, we're going to miss the beaches. We're off course. But you see this little French town that is being bombarded by 2 Nazi Panzer tanks. And then they see there are GIs in the town. Turns out that there was one squad of paratroopers who were blown off course, and they landed here, and they're trapped in the town, and they're sitting ducks. And then somebody cut out a coupon because they wanted to order some toy soldiers. And they're trying to reach the jetty, but it's getting too shallow. Says, we'll never make it. And the general, he gives them a helping hand, lifts the boat up just enough so they can get by the jetty before it runs aground and capsizes. So there they are. They got on the jetty, but they're practically sitting ducks themselves. They're hustling undercover, get undercover. Now they're undercover, but they can't go anywhere because they get blasted from either side. They're there to help save these soldiers. So Stewart says, "Okay, boys, here we go. Full speed ahead. I got a plan." He says, "Head up that dune." See, and the Panzers have them. I guess they're Tigers, not Panzers. Have them in the crossfire, and they go scrambling up the dune, kind of zigzagging. But they haven't been able to get their those tigers haven't been able to get their distance just right. So they're climbing up, get up. So we get up there, we're going to be sitting ducks. Said, "No, I got a plan." And then we got bunch of ants. Here we go. Claw. They just get up to the peak of that dune, and the 2 tigers draw a bead on each from each side. Draw a bead on them just as the haunted tank sitting on that dune. The dune gives way and they slide out, and the two tigers take out each other. Meanwhile, the haunted tank is slid down and down the dune is sitting on its side. They get all the grateful soldiers and the grateful townspeople. And so what are we going to do? We're like this. And they get the townspeople, and they're able to eventually, using all kinds of ropes and manpower, get the tank back down on her treads, and then them and the soldier boys are off to where they're supposed to be. And that is the end of that story. That, I think, is the best haunted tank story I have read. I really, really like that story. And over the years, I don't know how many. I've probably read a couple dozen haunted tank stories over the years. That is the best one. I'm surprised it wasn't Robert Kanigher, because he usually wrote the best ones. But this was a really good story by Bob Haney. Great artwork by Sam Glansman, who is by no means my favorite artist for the war comics, but he did a great job here. And then it has a shorter backup story, which I'll just talk briefly about, called The Avenging Wind. It says, here's an American boy playing with a toy airplane, and at the same time in Japan is a Japanese boy playing with a kite, and they're both dreaming of being pilots. Then jump ahead many years to the middle of the war, and there is an American aircraft carrier, and That boy is grown up. American boy is grown up, and he's one of the pilots, one of the aviators on this aircraft carrier, and they're growing up, and that Japanese boy has grown up to be a Japanese pilot, a kamikaze, and they're going up and they're attacking that. There's some great air battle scenes between the American planes and the Japanese planes. And here is where those two boys, now grown up and enemy pilots, come together. Engaged in an aerial battle. The American takes out one of the Zeros, but he's got this other Zero on his tail. He manages to outmaneuver him and inflict great damage on the Zero. The Japanese pilot realizes it, and he starts his dive with his crippled plane to plunge into the flight deck of the American aircraft carrier. Now that American pilot sees what's happening, and he does the only thing he can think to do. He plays kamikaze himself, ramming his plane into the Japanese plane, sending it off course so that they both crash together into the ocean, killing both. I think that's very touching and poignant. And then it ends up a similar scene: an American boy in New York playing with a toy airplane, and a Vietnamese boy playing with a kite. And then said, history repeats itself. Because remember, this is from '75. This is just after the Vietnamese War, Vietnam War. And I think that's a very touching and poignant story. It was a very good issue. I really, really enjoyed this issue of GI Combat. And as I said, my favorite haunted tank story. So thank you for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Do you like the war comics? I do. They were pervasive when I was growing up in my house. I probably had and read as many or more war comics and Western comics than I ever did the superhero comics. Before 12 or 13 years old. And I still really, really enjoy the war comics. Not that I like the war, but I like the comics. I like the storytelling. Unfortunately, it seems like comic book stuff is synonymous with superheroes, and especially in the movies. But virtually any storytelling works in comics. Just like with the movies. From science fiction to war to the superheroes to regular action adventure to the most mundane. So like Harvey Picar's American Splendor. To the funny animals. You name it. Comics works for that, and they're all legitimate genres. But unfortunately, in recent decades, it's almost exclusively the venue of some horror, but mostly superheroes. Don't get me wrong, I like superheroes, but the world does not revolve around superheroes. Okay, so leave me a comment. Do you like the war comics? What are some of the titles you've read? What are your favorites? And who was your favorite publisher of war comics? And overall, DC is the best. And then probably Charlton was right behind, but they didn't really have much in the way of continuing series. And and then Marvel. Marvel did a really good job, especially since they had continuing series and didn't do the anthology stuff so much for the war comics. And that's all I've got. Now remember, comics are art.